Creating a website that is globally distributed, incredibly fast, and automatically deployed used to be hard. Adding in custom domains and SSL certificates, that used to be even more tricky. Now, all that can be done for free in a few minutes. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to use Azure Static Web Apps to host a Blazor WebAssembly application with a custom domain. The site will be replicated around the globe and will be secured with a custom SSL certificate, all without us having to do anything additional. Now, if this is the first video you've watched of mine, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. I provide videos twice a week here on YouTube to help you grow as a developer. I also have a full set of training courses on IamTimCorey.com and a podcast titled Dev Questions. I encourage you to check out all the resources that I have to offer. In this video, as with most of my videos, I'm going to create some source code. And if you'd like a copy of that source code, use the link in the description. Okay, we're going to start off by looking at what are Azure Static Web Apps. So this is the site for the Azure Static Web Apps. You can go to azure.microsoft.com and look for Azure Static Web Apps. And in here, it's going to explain to you all the things that Static Web Apps are. They're very easy to use. They are hosted globally, meaning your content isn't on just one server. It's on multiple servers around the globe so that the server closest to your user will be the one that supplies it, making it the fastest possible for every one of your users. They can talk to API functions, such as Azure functions. We're not going to do that in this video, but that is definitely possible and easy to do. They have a streamlined build and deployment process. We're going to see just how easy that is because it's basically going to be done for us. We're not going to have to write any deployment code or work with the YAML at all. We're just going to have to say, yeah, I want to do that, and it will do it for us. And we can even have a seamless staging environment. So with all of that, you're going to ask the question, yes, but how expensive is this? Well, the good news is it's really cheap. Let's go to pricing, and we'll see the pricing for static web apps. We're going to focus here on the free tier. So if you're using this for small to mid-size web applications, if they're hobby projects, smaller projects, personal projects, your portfolio, those kind of things, you're probably more than fine with the free tier. So the free tier is going to give you 100 gigabytes of bandwidth for your entire subscription for a month. So every month you get a new 100 gigabytes of bandwidth. Now that's a lot of bandwidth, especially if your site isn't huge. Now, if you create a huge site and make your users download lots of stuff, that's going to eat up that bandwidth. Now, notice it says there are no bandwidth overages. That just means that it's really fine print down here, but it says if you exceed those overages, then you get your sites turned off until the end of the month. So you only get that 100 gig and that's it. Now, you could pay for the standard. We'll get to that in a minute. You get 2 custom domains per app, not per subscription, per app. This per subscription here means that if you have 10 static web apps, they're only sharing that 100 gigabyte per month limit. This down here is 2 custom domains per app, meaning if you have 10 custom static web apps, then you have up to 20 domain names. You get free SSL certificates, so you don't have to pay for them or really even configure them. You do get a total storage of half a gigabyte. Okay, and that's per deployment. Per static web app. A quarter of a gigabyte per web app. So you can have up to half a gigabyte total of storage. That may not seem like a lot, but for a website, it really kind of is. You do have the ability to hook up to Azure functions as well. So that's the free plan. That's what we're going to use today. I think that's more than enough for what you need. However, if you wanted to go to a paid version for a production app that you need to have a better SLA on, well, then it's $9 per month per app. And that gets you 100 gigabytes per subscription. So still same bandwidth amount, but then it's 20 cents per gigabyte over that. So you have the ability to go over that. And you can have 5 domains per app, and you can have more storage space, half a gig per app, and then total of 2 gig per installation. So the reason you have a larger size there is because of the fact that you can have staging sites, you can have other versions of your site, not just the main version. So that's why I say 2 gig total, or over here, half a gig total. When it's really per installation, it's a quarter of a gig or it's half a gig. So, and there are service level agreements with the standard, not the free. That just means that there are agreements in place as to the uptime, and there aren't for the free version, which means if the downtime lasts too long, oh well. Now, Microsoft's not going to intend to have the downtime last too long. They're not going to try to put you in the lower end of the tier. They're going to still try to have great uptime, and they still will. It's just that you don't get any money back if you have more downtime than expected, whereas on a standard plan, you would. So with that, that's what the Azure Static Web Apps are. They're for hosting sites that are just client-side. So the really easy ones are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript sites. So if you're thinking about deploying a site that has Angular, React, or Vue, great option here. If you're thinking about deploying a site that has just HTML and CSS, great option here. But also, if you're thinking about deploying a Blazor WebAssembly project, also a great option. Now, this would not be the Blazor WebAssembly project that's also hosted by an API. You can't do both. You can only do the Blazor WebAssembly project because that lives fully on the client. So that's the only real limitation here. We'll see all the different types of apps we can deploy to it, but for us, we're going to use a Blazor WebAssembly project to show off you can do that. And the first thing I do here is we're going to create a new repository on GitHub. GitHub is one of the easiest ways to connect to our static web app because of the fact that Azure can read it and deploy right from there and set things up for us. So we're going to do that. So I'm logged in here as I am Tim Corey. I'm going to create a repository name. Let's call this the Timco Enterprise app. Now, this is no relation to the Timco Retail Manager. This is just a different thing. I use Timco for a lot of things. So this is not connected to the Timco Retail Manager, although we could have deployed the Blazor WebAssembly portion of the Timco Retail Manager to an Azure Static Web App. So this is our demo app, our demo static web app, just to show off that it's a demo, okay? We're gonna keep this private. There's a couple reasons for this. One is that it's only gonna last for a little while. I'm not gonna make it last for a long time. I'm actually gonna delete this repository. I don't wanna keep it around. I don't wanna clog up my business repository with this extra repository that's no longer needed after this video. So that's one reason, but another reason why is I want to show off the fact it's not just public repositories that you can do this with. You can do this with private repositories as well. So we'll add a README, we'll add a gitignore for Visual Studio, and we will not choose a license, which just means it's the most closed off license possible. We'll hit Create Repository, and there we go. We have our repository. We're all set up. We can grab the path to that location. Now, the way I like to do this is I'm going to do the clone right from my command prompt. So I'm going to say git clone and that URL, and that's going to clone down the repository and create my folder for me. Now I can just minimize this or exit out of it. Let's go over to Visual Studio. We're going to say open a project or solution, and I can go to samples and look for that Timco Enterprise app, and there's nothing here. That's because, well, the repository has been created. I have not yet created my project, so I hit cancel here. Let's go to new project, and we're going to choose a Blazor WebAssembly project. Hit next. We're going to change this to be C samples, and let's call this our Timco Enterprise, and we'll call this the Timco Enterprise app, which just happens to correspond to the name of the repository, which means it's going to create that folder which already exists. Let's hit next. We're going to say .NET 6 long-term support, yes for HTTPS, no for authentication, no for hosted, and no for progressive web app. Hit create. And the point here is not to create this fancy WebAssembly application. It's just to create something for us that will show off deploying to a static web app. Now notice that we are in source control. And it says, hey, you got a whole bunch of stuff here to commit, because it's picked up the fact that we did clone our repository down. So let's just make a couple of changes just to kind of show off that, yes, this is our page. Let's go to the index page, and let's say hello YouTube, like so. And we'll take away the survey prompt. We don't need to have a survey here, but let's do a counter, like so, just so we have it. And let's go and turn off our navigation menu. I don't like that navigation bar necessarily. I hate seeing it all the time. So with that, let's go about and change this to be I am timcorey.com. Just we customize this a little bit more. And if we run this now, we should see that our application looks different than the standard one, but it's still just a sample application. So there you go. Really simple sample. The counter works. It says hello YouTube. The about link goes to iamtimcorey.com. So everything's good there. So that's now our Blazor WebAssembly application. Again, just enough changes to prove it's not just a pre-launched site. So now what we can do is we can go over to Azure. And I have Azure pulled up here. By the way, let's commit those changes first, actually. So let's commit all. So I'm going to not select anything, so it will take everything. I'm going to say initial commit, like so. And I'm going to commit all and sync. Okay, but that's because I know I just created it, so therefore we should be all good. With that, if we now refresh, we should see we have a whole bunch of files in here, including our solution file, our enterprise file with all of our stuff. So with that, we now have all of our information. And notice I call it initial commit. We already had initial commit. Oops. Oh well. Neither here nor there. Now what we need to do is go to our Azure. We need to create a new resource. So create resource. I'm going to search for static. And there's going to be a static web app. Select that and come up with this. This is the Azure Static Web App. It's a pretty great service. In fact, it should be one of my favorites. Let's just favorite that. So a static web app, to create it, we hit create, and then it's going to ask us a few questions. First off, we're going to create a new resource group, Timco Enterprise, like so. Just, again, the resource group is a grouping that allows us to create and modify things as a group. So we'll call this our Timco Enterprise. And we're going to select the free plan, not the standard plan. The standard plan is $9 a month. The free plan is free. We're going to put in Essential US because that's where I am. I'm going to say sign in with GitHub. Now, I've already connected it, so it says, hey, do you want to have this connected? Sure. Go ahead and connect. It's going to ask for my password. Let me go ahead and paste that in there and hit confirm. And now it says what organization? Well, Tim Corey, that's the one I want, or I am Tim Corey. Repository is going to be Timco Enterprise App, and the branch. I'll deploy on main, but this is where in an actual production environment, I would deploy from a prod branch. So you can deploy off of any branch you want, but I like to deploy off of a prod branch. I'll have a staging branch. I'll have my main branch be my development main branch. So in our case, I'm not going to create an extra branch just to show you different branches, but just note that normally I would deploy to a production branch rather than just the main. So with that, it now knows what organization, what repository, and what branch to deploy from. And we're going to say, okay, for build presets, which framework, generator, or other do you want to use? So if you're using Angular, React, Svelte, Vue, or Blazor, choose one of those. If you're using Gatsby, Hugo, or VuePress, choose one of those. If you're using a web application that's just HTML, CSS, and maybe some vanilla JavaScript, that would be custom. So if we choose custom, it's going to say, okay, where is your application located, which is the root, just like it is right now. And do you have any API or output locations? For us, we're going to choose Blazor. So it's going to say, okay, you're deploying the client, API location, I'm not going to have one, so I'll get rid of that. And then output location is www root. That's where it builds the product into. So that is the standard for Blazor. We can hit review and create. And create. Now what it's going to do is it's going to deploy for me the actual site. It's going to deploy the static web app, which is already done. Let's go to resource. But also, what it's done is it has created for me a new commit on GitHub. And that commit will have the deployment information for deploying the site to Azure. So let's go look at Azure again. Let's hit refresh. Notice it now says 3 commits. It has this new GitHub or .github/workflows folder. And inside here, we have a YAML file. This YAML file, notice it's 45 lines, and it's probably too small to see. Let's zoom in here. And it says, okay, on the main branch or on pull requests for the main branch, I want you to go ahead on Ubuntu and build and deploy the job. Here's the steps. Check it out. Build and deploy. Here's the information, including the repo token, which there's a private or a secret key there. We're going to upload the file. Here's the information about the client and www root, the API location, close the pull request job if it's a pull request, and so on. So that's what just got created. Now over here on our website, we have a URL. We click on it. Notice it's let's zoom in here. It's wonderful grass and then number.azurestaticwebapps.net. That's a generated URL. It's going to be different every single time. Not every time you load the web app, but every time you create a new static web app, we'll have a new URL that's totally different. That's just because they're globally unique. If we click on this, we're going to see that it's waiting for our content. So it's working on deploying that. Our deployment is in the process of going. Once it's done, then it will be here. Okay? And it's going to do that automatically for us. Now, it should be deployed by now, but we can check this out by going to our GitHub and going to Actions. And here we can see that we actually have a problem. There's an error in our build and deploy. We select the build and deploy, and it says that right here, the app directory location of client is invalid. That's because I didn't put it in the right spot. So let's go back and fix this. So let's go back to our code and notice that it's in the Timco Enterprise folder. That's where my Blazor WebAssembly project is. We're not building the solution necessarily. We're building the project. We're deploying just this version, which is just the client itself, the Timco Enterprise project. So I need this path instead of client. So I can go to GitHub Workflows. I can modify in here. I can change the step here where it says app location. I can modify this. So let's go ahead and make a change. We can do this right in GitHub. So I can come down here where it says client. This I can change to Timco Enterprise. And I can then scroll down, make sure I got everything set up. I do. Let's start the commit. And I'm going to say that I am fixing the project location in action or in workflow. I don't need a commit message. I'm going to commit directly to main. I'm going to hit commit. So that's going to change that YAML file. And now if you go to actions here, we'll see that it's now queued to start deploying this project. If this was the right fix, then it will go through and deploy this project. We can click on it and look at what it's doing. It will take a little bit to deploy. It does depend on the resources you have available to you. Right now, it's pretty fast though. So it's going to download, it's going to build, and then it's going to deploy my application. I'll go ahead and pause this until it's done, just because there's no need for you to watch basically paint dry, but they shouldn't take more than a minute or two. Okay, so once this is done, then I'll come back and we'll see it work. And we're done. So that took about 4 minutes to complete. If we go into the job and look, we'll see that it deployed all the steps, and we can see, actually read through everything it did, all the logs for that if we want to. But we can come back over here to the Timco Enterprise. We can open this again or come back to our site and hit refresh. When we do, we'll see that the page loads our web app. Okay, so our site does work. Also notice that we have HTTPS. This is secure, and it is using a valid certificate. So this now is deployed and running. But we're not done yet, because that's not a great URL. Wonderful grass and some numbers. We're not going to remember that. So let's go ahead and use a custom domain with this so that we can use the timcoenterprise.com that I own. So to do that, we go to custom domains in our Azure site. And we say, I want to add a new site. And I'm going to add a subdomain site called www. Now, we could just use the root domain timcoenterprise.com. The downside of doing that with a static web app is the fact that it's going to be a CNAME redirect. If you don't know what that means, basically, we're going to redirect timcoenterprise.com to wonderful grass, that's number.azurestaticwebapps.net, which may sound fine and it will work fine. However, it's going to cause some problems if you wanted to also use email or other things with that domain. So instead what we'll do is we will redirect the www to go to this Timco Enterprise location. And then the root domain will just say, hey, if you go to the root domain and don't put anything else, so just timcoenterprise.com, let's go ahead and redirect you to a www version. So long way of explaining that you kind of want to have it be a subdomain, not the root domain that you send here. So www.timcoenterprise.com. We get the green check mark. We hit next. And now it says, okay, what I want you to do is you're going to validate you own this. You can do that with a CNAME, or you can do a TXT record. We're going to use a CNAME since we have to do that anyways. In order to do this, what we do is we have to enter this record in our DNS. So let's zoom in here a little bit so you can see it. So this record is a CNAME record. Again, if you're not familiar with DNS, then you might need to get some help setting this up, but it's actually not that hard. What you're going to do is go to your DNS provider. Your DNS is what matches an IP address to your domain name. This is where you say, hey, I want you, when you're going to my domain name, I want you to go to this server. So in this case, we're going to create a new CNAME record. And we're going to use it for www or other subdomain. So in our case, we're using www. Yes, www is a subdomain of timcoenterprise.com. And we're going to say the value is wonderful grass and all the rest. Just hit copy. So now what I'll do is I'm going to go to my DNS and set this up. So let me pull that up. I'll pull it up on the other screen because I'm not sure that I want to show you everything. Let me look at it first. I don't see anything incriminating here, so I'm going to pull across and show you. So I use Namecheap for my domain names and for my for everything. Okay, so Namecheap just is awesome for domain names. It's awesome for a lot of things. I don't use hosting or private email, but for domain names itself, it's awesome. So I'm gonna get rid of this parked domain name. I create a new record. It's a CNAME record. It's for the www subdomain. I'm going to paste in that value, and I'll say that the time to live is 1 minute. And that's it. That's all I had to do for my host record. Notice I have the host, the @ which is the root domain. It gets redirected to the www version. With that, we should be good to go. Now, this is going to take some time. Let's hit add here. It's going to take some time to validate. DNS is not instantaneous. It has to update databases around the world. And depending on which database the Azure is pointed at, may be different than the database you just updated. So it takes some time to replicate that around the globe. Therefore, it's not going to be an instantaneous, oh, it found it. You may have to wait a few hours. It says 48 hours for DNS to propagate. The reality is it's nowhere near that long. I usually find that it takes about 15 minutes. Sometimes less, sometimes more, but usually it's less. So just give it a little bit of time. Be patient with it. Don't start making changes because you don't know what's going on. Let it alone, let it bake for a little bit, come back to it. If you leave it overnight and it doesn't find it, yes, then figure out why. Okay, in this case, it took about 5 to 10 minutes to do. Wasn't real long. So let's hit close. And now we have www.timcoenterprise.com. We hit copy, and let's go there. And there we go. We now have our website at timcoenterprise.com. Notice as well a SSL certificate. The connection is secure. If we look at the certificate itself, we'll see it's a valid certificate. It's good through June of 2022, but the reality is they'll keep renewing it for us. So this is trusted. It's a valid certificate. It's fine. It's good to use it. It's secure. So we've now deployed our site not just to Azure, but to Azure globally, meaning it's been replicated around the globe so that when you go to www.timcoenterprise.com, you're going to find the version that's closest to you because of the fact that Microsoft has replicated it around the globe. That means faster download times. It means your site will be more responsive. It means your site will be really, really quick to run. I use static web apps in production because of the fact that they're just so powerful. They make my site the fastest it can be. And that's really important because of the fact that the faster your site is, the more likely it'll show up in Google search results. So it's going to elevate that in search results because of the fact it's faster. Google likes fast, responsive sites. That's one of the things it likes. So that's why, for example, I just had the C#mastercourse.com. This was recently deployed. Oops. Did I misspell it? Nope, I just didn't put the www. And I don't have the redirect on. But this right here is running off of Azure Static Web Apps. Because of the fact that it is very, very fast, it allows me to make sure the site shows up in SEO and all the rest really well. So I use it in production because of how awesome it is. And notice it's not a paid promotional for Azure Static Web Apps. Azure Static Web Apps are free unless you get to the point where you're using so much traffic that you really need to upgrade to the $9 a month, which is all it is to host your site. So I would recommend that. It's not the same as just a web host. If you think of web host and think of static web apps and try to compare the two don't compare because of that global replication, because of the free SSL certificate and configuration, because of the additional speed benefits you get. So I would definitely recommend you check it out. In just a few minutes here, we create a web application, we create a GitHub repository, we set things up, we mess things up, we set up our Azure Static Web App, and we deployed. The actual deployment took no time at all. The cool thing is, if we come back over here to our Visual Studio and we say, hey, you know what? I want to say to your new Azure Static Web App, and I hit save, and I commit. Let's do a pull first, because we have those changes to bring in. And then we're going to say this new commit message is going to be updated homepage. And we'll stage this and we'll commit it. And let's go ahead and push that up. Okay, so I have made a change to our web application. If we come back over here to GitHub, let's zoom back out here to the regular size, and we'll come back to home, and we'll go back to our actions. Notice there's already a new job deploying those changes. Now, those changes are going to take about 4 minutes to deploy. But in 4 minutes, our site will now be updated with the latest version of our changes. So that's just how powerful it is. We've already got a complete CI/CD pipeline in place. Now, again, I deployed main, so that's going to be your production branch now. And if you want to make changes, I recommend you make changes on a different branch and then merge them into main when you're ready. But this is all set up for you. We didn't have to write any YAML code. We didn't have to mess around with all the secrets and all the rest. That was all taken care of for us, and it's now just done and working. So that's Azure Static Web Apps. That's an intro to them. There's a lot more you can do with, say, functions to be the API that supports your application if you need it. And there's a lot more you can do with configuring how they work, but really they're pretty simple. They can have authentication, they can have the Azure functions, but that's about it. After that, they're just a static web app. Now you may ask the question, can I deploy Blazor Server? No. Can I deploy MVC, Razor Pages? No. API? No. All those are no, because of the fact that this is for just client-side stuff. This is not for server-side. And that's one of the reasons why it can be so fast, because they're just files. It's just serving files. That's all it's doing, is serving files around the globe. And then the client downloads those files and runs them. That's what client-side applications are all about, is just downloading files and running them locally. Well, that's the only type of web application that will work in Azure Static Web App. If you want to deploy any of those other things that are server-side or server and client-side, then you need to use an Azure Web App, not a static web app. Okay? That's the difference. All right, if you have any questions, leave them down in the comments below. If you have any thoughts on Azure Static Web Apps, leave them down in the comments below as well. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, if you've used them before, if you haven't, or you're going to. And if you haven't yet built a portfolio, this is the place I'd recommend you start. Create a portfolio here. It'll be free, be fast, and you can show off what you can do. All right, thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.